Well, welcome to the second half of chapter 12. We are going to finish up a few things, and this part's not going to take as long as some of the others, but we kind of finished off last week with radio buttons and check boxes, and so this week we're going to finish up with actually an actual project. But one of the things they talk about that they really don't have a whole lot of examples for is this thing called borders. Now, a border is part of the class called the Borders Factory, and the Borders Factory has a lot of methods and instance variables and different things that we can utilize. So if you notice here on this example 12-29, notice how we got this nice thin box around this group of radio buttons. This is what's called a titled border. So the title is choices, and then the border basically goes around the grouping. So it's a nice way to because we have our radio button group that keeps those, if we check one, it basically unchecks the others, and it keeps it separate from other groups. Where this one actually puts a border on it, so it's visually shows a grouping of the radio buttons, or check boxes in this case. So if we look, there are a bunch of different methods that we can utilize. We've got to create compound border, and that one has two parts. It's got an inside edge and outside edge. We've got one called create an empty border. That basically creates an empty space. Create an etched border. It kind of has this etched look and feel to it. A line border, just a regular line border. We can change the thickness. We can create a lower beveled border, so it looks like it's beveled, but the lower edge is basically shadowed more. We got a matte, we've got a raised bevel, so it looks like it's raised off the page, and we've got a titled border we just basically looked at. So here's an empty border. We basically say border factory.create empty border, and then there's four ints we have to provide, and that's the top, left, right, bottom, and right. So there's a line border. We tell what color it is, and then the thickness. So we do a color, and then we do an int for the thickness. We do a titled border where we just go ahead and put a string in. Okay. So if I just kind of show you a couple examples. So what I've done is I've played around. I've added a titled border here. So the way I've done it. So I'm looking at the. So here's the color window. And what I've done is down here at the bottom, let me comment this out. But we had this thing called a message label. So the message label said click a button to select a color. And it was just a label on the screen. Well, I went ahead and basically voided, just made that a null, so it's going to the message label is going to do nothing at this point. And then I've created a panel.set border and create a titled border called click a button to select a color. So before we do that, let's just see what it looks like before we actually do this. So let me just comment these things out just so kind of we have an ideal of basically what it's going to do. So this is what it used to run when it looked like before. It basically just had a label on here. It said click a button to select a color. Okay. If I expand this out, we can see that everything's basically in line. If it doesn't have it basically pushes it down to the next line, which is what it did with the yellow button there. So again, I'm going to comment that out. And I have to have something there because message labels used down below. So just to kind of make this a quick change, I went ahead and just put a null value in there. Then I'm going to come down here and, whoop, I don't want that one. I want to uncheck this one. So here what I've done is I've said panel.setBorder. So the panel object, which is a JPanel, has a method built in called setBorder. Now, what type of border do you want? Well, that's where the border factory comes into play. So we just pass in this object called border factory into that set border method, and it basically takes it from there. So what I've done is inside of set border, I've got border factory.create title border, and I've got a string literal, that says click a button to select a color. So when I run this, it looks very similar, except you'll notice that there is a faint line going around all of the buttons, and at the title basically says click a button to select a color. So if I were to expand this window out, you would notice that this particular title always stays left aligned. I believe there's a setting for us to change the alignment. The default is left aligned, and then there's our box going around the entire group of items on our, basically this particular one puts a line around the entire panel. Okay, so if I do this, I'm going to uncomment this one out. Now this one says just create a line border and make it the color blue and a thickness of 2 pixels. So if I save this and I click run, we now notice we see a nice blue border going around our entire panel. Okay, and again, if I change the thickness, maybe I change it to a 5 instead of a 2. Whoop. And I hit save and I run it. Notice it's a nice thick blue line around the entire panel, as opposed to just a thin one we saw a few moments ago. So again, we have different options there. So the rest of the chapter goes into this thing called Brandy's Bagel House. So Brandy's Bagel House is an application. So think of it as a kind of a real life situation where we have been given the task of designing this application to be used by customers to order bagels. So white bagels are $1.25, whole wheat bagels are $1.50. Toppings, we got cream cheese, which is 50 cents, butter, which is 25 cents, peach jelly 75, blueberry jam is also 75. If they want coffee, regular coffee is $1.25, decaf is $1.25, cappuccino is $2. So it allows them to make selection. Now another thing we have to deal with is, just like our homework, is we have to do tax, some type of a taxing on the grand total that we get. So we got some things going on here. They're going to make some selections, and then they're going to basically create a grand total, and then we have to create a tax on that total. So we've kind of been given this task of creating this. So the next thing we have to do is we kind of have to draw out how we want the screen to look. And a lot of times our business partner, they might draw that out for us, and then we as a programmer just take what they've basically designed and go with it. So in this case, we've got looks like we've got a window, and we're going to have probably a panel inside of here, and we got a message at the top that says welcome to Brandy's Bagel House, and then you can see that we have 3 groupings. So we've probably got 3 panels, and we're going to have these 3 titles inside those panels. One says bagel, one says toppings, one says coffee. And again, looks like it's going to be the title border. We got a radio button, white or whole wheat. And then what toppings do they want? Cream cheese, butter, peach, or blueberry jam. They can have one, or they can have all, they can have none. And what type of coffee do they want? Do they want no coffee? They want regular coffee, decaf, or cappuccino. And then when we click the calculate button, that is going to basically kick off a listener that is going to do a totaling and a calculation of everything. So the very first thing we need to design is this thing called a greeting panel. The greeting panel holds the labels that says welcome to Brandy's Bagel House. And so this is basically what this is right here. So if we take a look at the greeting panel, it basically we import our JavaX.swing. It extends the JPanel. So this class, the greeting panel, extends the JPanel. So this is a JPanel class. And here is our constructor. And it says greeting equals new JLabel, welcome to Brandy's Bagel House. And then we go ahead and add the greeting to the panel. Pretty straightforward. So this guy is a JPanel. It's not a JFrame, it's a JPanel. So this is a separate panel altogether. So we've got a greeting, which is a JLabel, and we go ahead and add that greeting to this particular panel. Okay, how do we use this? Well, probably we're going to create a greeting panel object, and when we instantiate it, this constructor gets executed. Okay, just like we've seen in the first part of the chapter. So not too bad. So then we got this thing called the panel, or the bagel panel class. So if we take a look at the bagel panel class, so This is also a J panel, so we're extending the J panel. So now this class is a J panel class. Again, we inherit everything that a J panel has. We go ahead and create two constants. We tell it the size, the height and width of this panel. We then go ahead and we create two radio buttons. We've got a white bagel and a wheat bagel radio button. We create a button group. Then we go ahead and we have our bagel panel constructor. It's a no-art constructor. And we've got set layout. So set layout is a method that's inside of the J panel class. We can just say set panel. Or I'm sorry, set layout. And we're going to say it's a new grid layout. So it looks like we're going to have 2 rows, 1 column. We're going to say white bagel, which is our radio button, is equal to a new J radio button and white and true. So what we've done there is we've created a radio button with a label to the next of it that says white, and its default is checked. We say wheat bagel is a new J radio button, and it says wheat, so now we've got a radio button that said wheat. Okay, we've just got those. Now they're just there. Okay, think of it like this: we've just created them. They're just sitting there. They're not sitting really anywhere. They're just kind of sitting there in memory. So we go ahead and say BG is a new button group. So we've instantiated a button group. And then we say BG.add white bagel, BG.add the wheat bagel. So now we've got a button group. Now it's just sitting there. It's not sitting on top of anything. It's just sitting there in memory. We've gone ahead and add the 2 radio buttons to it. So now we have a button group with 2 radio buttons inside of it. Then we say set border, border factory dot create title border bagel. Okay, so inside of the J panel, there is a method called set border. So we're telling it we want you to take that set border method inside of the J panel, which is what the bagel panel is, and then use the border factory dot create titled border. So it's going to call the method inside of the border factory, and it's going to basically put bagel in there. So what that does, that puts a border, thin border all the way around the J panel, in this case the bagel panel, and then it's going to have bagel as the title. Again, those are just sitting there. So now we go ahead and say add white bagel, add wheat bagel. So we go ahead and add those to the current panel. Okay. So when we create this constructor, we go ahead and we've set a border. We've gone ahead and add the white bagel and the wheat bagel to the panel. And since they're part of the button group, that got added as well. That kind of got added behind the scenes, so to speak. Just adding the radio buttons also adds the button group. So it keeps those in a group separate from any other radio buttons. We also have a method called get bagel cost, and we go ahead and create a bagel cost, which is a double, and we initialize it to 0.0. If it's a white bagel is selected, meaning if they've selected the radio button, if the radio button white is selected, we go ahead and say the bagel cost is equal to a white bagel, else the bagel cost is equal to the wheat bagel, which, I'm sorry, these finals up here are not the size of the panel, sorry. These are the costs of the bagels, my bad. So we go ahead and take those costs that we've set up here and we've set them to each of these bagel costs. Okay, so depending on what was selected, we go ahead and set the cost. We go ahead and return the bagel cost. So at some point we select a bagel, it goes in and returns the cost as well. Okay. Now, and that's a great point to make, is we always want to keep things, when we're dealing with bagels, let's deal with the cost of the bagel as well. Let's do that in the bagel panel. Okay. So if we go back to the book, okay, so if we go on to the next panel, this happens to be the topping class panel, and again, we go back over here, and here is the toppings panel, and we look, it also extends the J panel. So again, the topping panel is a J panel as well. It inherits everything that the J panel has. We go ahead and it looks like we go ahead and set the costs as constants. We got the cream cheese, butter, peach jelly, and blueberry jam. We set those costs as 0.5, 0.25, 0.75, 0.75. We go ahead and create 4 check boxes. We got a cream cheese, a butter, peach jelly, and blueberry jam. Then we have our constructor. So again, when we instantiate this panel, it goes and sets the layout to a new grid layout, 4 rows, 1 column. We go ahead and say cream cheese, so we instantiate the cream cheese as a new J check box, and it's going to have the label cream cheese. With butter, labels butter, peach jelly. Okay, so we have those 4 check boxes built with labels to the right of them. We go ahead and call the set border method inside of the J panel. We go ahead and create a border factory.create titled border, and it says toppings. So now this particular J panel is going to have a thin line around it with toppings at the top of that border. We go ahead and say add cream cheese. So again, add is a method inside of J panel, and it's going to add this cream cheese, J checkbox, butter, peach jelly, and blueberry jam. The jam. Those 4 checkboxes are going to be added to the panel. And they're going to have a border around them. So now also I have a get topping cost. Again, we want to keep the toppings with the toppings. So here we create a double topping cost. We initialize it to 0.0, and we say if the cream cheese is selected, so if that checkbox is selected, we say topping cost plus equal cream cheese. Now you notice we're doing a plus equal this time, and the reason we're doing that is because we can select multiple checkboxes. So if the cream cheese is selected, we go ahead and add that to the topping cost. Right now the topping cost is 0. I add the cream cheese cost, which is 50 cents. If they selected butter as well, we add butter to the topping cost, which if we selected the cream cheese, it's got 50 cents. We add butter, which is 0.25. It basically added 25 cents to the topping cost, which is now a total of 75. So again, it does that through all of these if statements, and we go ahead and return the topping cost, which is the total. Okay, so the last thing we have is this thing called a coffee panel. The coffee panel is, again, it's just a J panel. And we create 4 constants for the cost. We have no cost, which is 0.0, and then we got the regular coffee, decaf, and cappuccino. We create 4 radio buttons and 1 radio button group. Then we have our constructor, which is our coffee panel. We go ahead and set the layout to a grid layout, 4 rows, 1 column. We go ahead and instantiate each one of those radio buttons for the no coffee, regular coffee, decaf, and cappuccino. And again, we've got the labels off to the right there. But notice that we went ahead and made the regular coffee true. So that's the default. That one's automatically checked. We go ahead and instantiate the new button group, and then we go ahead and add those 4 radio buttons to the button group. So now that says these guys are together. No other radio buttons will affect these 4 radio buttons. But if I check on each one of these, it will uncheck the others within that group. We go ahead and say set border. Again, set border is part of the J panel, and we're going to go ahead and get a border factory.create titled border. So again, puts a nice thin round around this panel, and it's going to have coffee as the top part of that border. We go ahead and add the no coffee checkbox, the regular coffee checkbox, the decaf coffee, and cappuccino. Okay. Again, we do have the get coffee cost. That's part of this panel. So again, we go ahead and set the coffee cost equal to 0. It's a double. And if no coffee is selected, we go ahead and put the fee of no coffee on there, regular coffee, decaf, and cappuccino. Again, we return that cost. Notice it's not a plus equal because this is a radio button. It's going to be one or the other. So we've got our 4 panels: our greeting, our bagel, our topping, and our coffee. We've got those 4 panels built. Now we need to put it all together. So if we go to this thing called the Order Calculator GUI, this guy extends a J-frame. So this entire thing is a J-frame. So we've got our bagel panel, topping panel, coffee panel, greeting panel. Here's our J panel, here's our J button, and then we've got our final tax rate, which is 0.06. Okay, so we've got these items which we're going to instantiate with the panels we've already got. So here is our constructor. We go ahead and set the title. So inside of our title, the top part of our windows, it's going to basically say order calculator. We have to tell it what to do when we click the X button. We go ahead and set this layout to a new border layout. We've got a banner is equal to new greeting panel. Okay, so it looks like we're creating 4 different panels. So we're going to have a banner panel, a bagel panel, a toppings panel, and a coffee panel. And we go ahead and instantiate it as a greeting panel, which we just talked about, the bagel panel, which we've already discussed, a topping panel. So we've instantiated it as each one of those is new. Now remember what happened there. Every time we instantiated, the constructor inside of each one of those classes, or I should say object at this point, was executed. Then we go ahead and build the button panel. So we come down here, here's our build button panel. So we've got our button panel as a new J panel. We have a calc button and an exit button. We have a calc button to add action listener and exit button to add action listener. So we've got 2 listeners for those particular items right there. And they're being instantiated as a new calc button listener and a new exit button listener. So we go ahead and add our button panel, which is the calc button, and then the button panel will go ahead and add the exit button. So we're adding those to the panel. Okay. Then at some point we need to add those to the J-frame, which we'll see here in a sec. So here's our calc button listener. So in here we go ahead and create a subtotal, a tax. So we have our doubles, which is subtotal, tax, and total. We go ahead and say subtotal is equal to the bagels.get bagel cost plus toppings.get topping cost plus coffee.get coffee cost. So it goes and looks at each one of those items that's selected, and again, remember how it went to those costs? It gets each of those items and adds them all together. So then our tax is equal to the subtotal times the tax rate. So the subtotal went ahead and called each one of those methods to get the totals, added them all together. Now I take the subtotal and multiply it times the tax rate. Now we have tax. Then I can say the total is equal to the subtotal plus the tax. So it's kind of nice. So I've got 3 separate variables. They're all doubles. One is a subtotal. All right, total them all together. Tax, I multiply times the tax rate, the subtotal times tax rate, and now I have the tax. Then I add the subtotal and the tax together to get the grand total. I go ahead and use my decimal format, and I call it the dollar, and it basically is 0.00. So it's only going to have 2 decimal places. And then I go ahead and say, and in my J option pane, the subtotal is $.format subtotal. I go to a new line, tax with the $sign, then $.format tax. And then the total is again on a new line, $sign total.format total. Okay. On my exit button listener, again, it's system.exit. That closes the program, just stops the program altogether. And here's my public static void main. This basically allows us to, again, we've seen this in the past last week. This goes ahead and instantiates a new order calculator object, which basically kicks off this constructor. We'll go ahead and run this. So here's what it just did. It went ahead and has my white and wheat. Remember, white was already checked. Here's my toppings. Notice, so here was one panel. Here are 3 panels, and then here's another panel that has 2 buttons. This top panel is my green panel, just has a label in it. This particular middle, we go ahead and bring in those 3 panels, and then we go ahead and, so let's maybe do this first. Let's go back up to the top and let's look at what we got to do. So, so here's where I add the banner, the border layout north. So it looks like I'm using the border layout. So here's my border layout north. I'm going to use my banner, which is the greetings panel. Bagels pointed west, so I want that to be west. Here's center, here's east, and then the button panel is in the south. So that's how it set it up. So I've got my north, which is the greeting, then east, center, and west is going to be each of the panels for the bagel, topping, and coffee, and then the south is going to be our button. I go ahead and do a pack, which goes ahead and packs it all together. Think of it just kind of packing it all together. And then I set visible equals true. So my J-frame is set visible equals true. And this just kind of comes all together at that point. So again, I run it. Here is my north, my east, center, and west. Here is my south, these two buttons. So I can click on white or wheat. I can select the different toppings that I want. Regular coffee is calculated, so I go ahead and hit calculate. It called each one of those get cost methods. The total, the subtotal was added, all those three were added together from those three methods. We calculate the tax from that, so then we display the subtotal and the tax. We add those two together and the total, which is $3.98, and there we go. And again, I can either click X or I can click exit, and it's both going to do the same exact thing. So pretty slick. It seems like a lot of stuff's going on there, but think about it. Each one of the bagel panel, the coffee panel, the greeting panel, or I should say the bagel, topping, and coffee all have a method that basically gets the cost method. Then we basically we add those three methods together, because remember all three of those return a double. Whatever we get back, we add together. We calculate the tax. We get a subtotal, get the total. Boom, we are done. Okay. So pretty slick, pretty cool. Again, if you have any questions or anything, go ahead and give me an email, give me a yell. At some point, we can Skype, we can talk, however it might be, and let me basically give you any kind of help I can give you. Okay? Okay, we'll see you next time.